Okay, so first of all, I just want to thank the museum for inviting me to have this exhibition here. This is a very personal project for me. And we opened it the 1st of June, so it's also great that it's been here for such a long time, and it's allowed a lot of people to see it. So I brought my notes too, so I don't forget to tell you anything. So big thanks to the museum, and thanks for all of you coming today to hear about my story. And if you have any questions as we go along, just, ask. But this is a really personal project for me. And I worked with the curator here. She had very definite ideas about how she was going to write all of the text. And in fact, you can come here and read it all and get the story. But I wanted to be a little friendlier with some of it, and she was wanting to be very museum-like. Mm-hmm. But the story is all here. But the story starts with these paper dolls. So this is 1958, and my first passionate artistic experience. So there were several days when I worked at my parents' table tracing around these two paper dolls I had. And these are the only things I had left from my original paper doll set were these two dolls. So I'd trace around one and design a dress for her and paint it, watercolor painting, and design the other. So it was like 4 days of really intensive work. And I remember distinctly when I ran out of my mother's good typing paper and had to substitute lined school paper. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't long after that I think I lost interest. But you can see there's a couple of them here that are from the lined school paper. So my mother saved all of these. There were about 65 pieces altogether. At the same time that she was sending my brothers comic books and baseball cards to the paper drives of those days. She saved the paper dolls. So that was really a good thing that she did that. My brothers are not too happy about it now, but that's okay. And so I had this idea about using these dresses. I was inspired by another artist in a project she was doing, looking back at her family and her history. So I had this idea that I would take several of these dresses and remake them into full-size paper dresses. And I thought I'll mount them on a plexiglass tube and light it up within and call it Time Travelers, looking back to move forward. So I was going through a difficult transition myself, and this really allowed me to focus my creative time. So it opened actually at the Young Center in 2014. And so while I was working on this, I would go to the Young Center's site and check through, and I've been associated with them for several years, but I came upon this quote from Carl Jung, where he said, "What did you do as a child that made the hours pass like minutes? Herein lies the key to your earthly pursuits." So that really resonated with me, and it was a great tagline for this exhibition that was about my childhood and my first passion. So the museum then, they've arted it on the window over here. So that's really kind of the theme of the show, is what we did as children. So I picked 6 of these dresses to remake into full-size paper dresses so I could experiment with some new paper techniques and bring these dresses forward. So this is sort of the first one of this is kind of the showcase piece because it takes up so much space, but the original paper doll dress was just this plain white sheath dress with the blue design going down the front. But when you work as an artist, you see everything in a different way. So in the summer of 2013, when I started working on this project, there was a Superman movie that came out that summer. And there's Superman with his cape. And I thought, a cape would be such a nice enhancement on that plain white sheath dress. And maybe if it was made of 1,000 blue butterflies, I thought. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And there's more than 1,000 here. But it was a real meditative process every morning to fold as many blue butterflies as I could before I started the rest of the project. And it was tricky to get these mounted on the tubes. In fact, I wondered why I had decided that, because it was impossible you couldn't form a dress. And so I bought one of those mannequins, with the Barbie doll shape, the little black fabric mannequins. So I formed all the dresses on that mannequin before I attached them to the cylinders. And they all break down into several pieces, so they're easily stored away. Okay. So when the museum asked for me to bring the exhibit here, they wanted to give it a new title. So they called it Paper Couture, which sounds very fashionable. So along with that, then, we included these robes. So the first one is over here. So this one is 5-inch squares, and it's about 8 feet tall. So it's just another example of using paper to make a garment. And so that, you know, the whole inside is red. It used a lot of paper. And then the back side is, you know, more of the same. So it'd make a nice room divider. So this is my first robe. This debuted in the windows of what's that building? It's on Congress Street in Austin. It was built in the early 1900s. Anyway, the windows were like 14 feet tall and 13 feet wide, and they wanted me to do something with the windows, and I thought, oh, a kimono, a paper kimono, and how would I do that? So this was my first experiment with doing a robe. And so I was running out of paper, so I started using this photograph of rocks that I had taken to add in so I could actually make the entire robe. So that was my first one, and there's two more. There's another one over on that wall, and there's one out in the hallway you'll see. So the museum wanted to call this paper couture, and so I brought all the paper couture I could. And then the frame pieces over here, these are 10 years after the paper doll clothes. So these are 1967-68 when I was at the University of Oklahoma studying fashion design and fashion illustration. So this was a history of fashion and fashion illustration class. And there's probably 30 of these, but I picked out a variety that were different colors and different styles to be part of this exhibition. So these are my original watercolor paintings, and I had as much fun doing this as I did during the paper doll dresses. And the gift shop has these. We made prints of them that I hand colored, so there are more copies of those. And then here are the other dresses that I worked on and different paper techniques. This blue ball gown is something called, this is a linear crumpling technique. So the paper comes in a long roll, and it's a drafting paper, so it's a very thin, almost, not tissue, but very thin paper. And so I painted it first and then crumpled it in this linear fashion over and over again to get the design of the skirt, and then modeled the bodice around the mannequin that I had. And then I took a watercolor painting class. I mean, I've done some watercolor, but I did some exploration that summer so I could get this mink. You know, when I was a kid, a mink stole was just the most exotic thing a woman could wear. So this dress had to have a mink. But for a long time, it just looked like bacon. But you know, if you look close, it really is. There's fur on there. So, and it's in several pieces. So that was fun to construct. Paper's very sculptable and very forgiving. So it'll just do about anything. So it was fun to get that mink stole to work. And then the other one over here I call the bubble flower dress. I'll call it a traditional crumpling technique, which you all know how to do. So I used letterhead paper, a really nice acid-free letterhead paper that I painted with acrylic paint, and then crumpled it, just like we do, and undid it and crumpled it again. So I crumpled it a lot, which was kind of hard on the hands. I actually got an assistant to help me do that until I got it really soft, and then I mashed them all out and sewed them together by hand until I had big sheets so I could actually form a skirt and make the bodice and set the sleeves in the bodice. If any of you sew, you know how much trouble it is to set a sleeve with fabric. It's even harder with paper. So I was really glad that none of the other dresses had sleeves to set. And then this is a camellia, an origami camellia that's on the dress. And I think in my original designs, there's a dress and a coat that went with it as well. Mm-hmm. And then for the pink party dress, I experimented with quilling. I think quilling was kind of a Victorian, turn-of-the-century activity that a lot of women did. And if you go online and look for quilling, you will see the most extraordinary artworks made out of quilling, really extraordinary. And I just needed enough to kind of give the pink party dress a little extra something. And even just that took me a lot of time. But it is just child's play next to what's online. But it was enough for the pink party dress. And I didn't know quite how I was going to do the skirt, but as I was working that summer, a friend of mine you know, who knows I work in paper, she had a bolt. This is a Japanese paper that's already been pressed like this. And she had a bolt of this paper that she said she didn't know what to do with it, and she knew I worked in paper, and so she just gave it to me, and it was exactly the right amount of paper to make two skirts to fit on this pink party dress. So things just, you know like it is. You get an idea, and then things just sort of happen to make it work. So without knowing how I was going to do it, it showed up at my front door effortlessly. So I depend on that now. Good luck to all of you doing it, too. So, and this is, I guess, some people call this a mermaid dress. I never called it that when I was a kid. I don't know what I called it. And the dress itself, the paper doll dress, is a little bit different. It's not quite this color. But this was my interpretation of it, to get that kick skirt and this cute little cape. So all of this, a lot of these papers are commercial printing papers. I used to work as a graphic designer for a long time, and I love the papers. Like this is I think this is Star Dream, this paper. So I have access to, you know, a lot of nice Japanese papers, but also these big parent sheets of commercial printing papers, which made it easier for me to construct these large pieces. And then this is an origami star, I call it a star ball. I learned it at a convention out in California probably about 10 years ago. So it's a fun piece to do. So there's that dress. And then there's just more of these designs from my university days. And then in the corner, really the centerpiece for me is this sewing machine of my mother's. So this is from 1930. My mother was a master seamstress. And that's why she recognized these paper doll dresses as being good. And so she saved those. And she gave me this machine when I was first married. And I sewed on it for a long, long time. And finally the motor just wound down. And the mechanic said that it would never work again. And so it's just been a piece of sculpture for me. But I wanted to use it to honor my mom for saving the paper dolls and to cover it with the gold and silver butterflies. I call it Free at Last. And this is a picture of my mother as a teenager in Kentucky. And so when I brought it over here for the exhibition, you know, here was a plug right here on the wall. And I knew the machine didn't work, but I found out that the little light bulb on the machine, the little light still works. So the electricity still works to the light. So that was sweet. It was kind of like a little spirit of my mom coming through. Yeah. So she was a master seamstress in Kentucky, a very tiny community. And over here in this case, this is really great that the museum had this case so I could use some documentation for the show. So this first starts out with my mother's documentation on her 4-H club work. But she, in this little tiny community in Kentucky, she ended up winning the state championship for a dress that she designed and got to go to the convention in Chicago. And that was a big deal. But you know, I didn't really hear much about that when I was growing up. She kind of kept a lot of this quiet. But after she died, I found a lot of documentation, her handwriting, what she learned in the 4-H. So this is really this is an honoring of my mom for saving the dresses and being
Chicago, Illinois.
There's a souvenir program. And so then there's pictures of my mom and dad, and then I included this picture of my brothers, since it was their baseball cards and comic books that went to the paper drives of those days. And then when I was a kid, you know, and worked on the paper doll dresses, I mean, all I had left from my paper doll set were those 2 dolls. That's all I had. But about 20 years ago, I was happened into a paper doll convention that was in some mall here in Houston, and when I came in, here was this original set. Now my dolls are on the back cover, but here was this original set that I had not seen since I was 9 years old, and I was just blown away. And so back in 1958, it cost me 15 cents, and so they charged me $35 for it. But you know, I would have paid $1,000 for it, because it was just thrilling to open it up again and see those designs that I'd seen as a kid. So here I am about the same time period. I like to say that I went from paper dolls to Barbie dolls to boys. So here's my daughter. So my mother would always bring out the paper doll dresses, and for her and her her cousin to play with whenever they came to visit them in Illinois.
And these are ones that you did.
Yeah, these are still my originals. And there's more than that, but I just sort of picked up my favorites to put in the frame. And then these are just some of my drawings from the university time. You know, if you followed Vogue magazine like I loved back in those days, you'd recognize Jean Shrimpton and Verushka. And then so when the exhibition first opened in 2014, it was at the Young Center. And so this is a photograph from the Young Center and the invitation. And along with this project, because it was my story, you know, based on this quote from Carl Jung, what did you do as a child that made the hours pass like minutes, that I asked other people to write their story. Because I had gotten a grant through the Houston Arts Alliance to do this project, and then I'd gotten a Kickstarter campaign to also help support the project. So there were a number of people that had supported me through this, and I asked them to write their stories. So this book is a collection of other people's stories about what they did as a child that made the hours pass like minutes. And then the last dress, which was really my favorite dress when I was a kid, was this black scarf dress. And so it's another linear crumpling. And then we put this here so everybody could feel what it really feels like before the paper got painted.
So you could paint it? You could paint that?
For the scarves and the blue ball gown, I painted the paper first, and then I did the crumpling.
Okay.
Yeah. Oops, let's see if there's anything else here. Well, lastly, there's a lot of my origami work in the gift shop down the hallway.
Look at that piece on you.
And then
Yeah.
Oh, that's
thank you. I love the dragonfly. I get a lot of people coming to me and telling me stories about dragonflies and people in their family who have died. There's this connection. And then there's right across the hallway, Shop the Symphony, which is another great shop. And if you'd like to be on my email list, I promise I won't send you much. I wear all the hats in my studio. So you get 3 or 4 emails a year if you want to do that. And there's a sign-up book out here, not only to leave your email if you want to, but to also write down your story of what it was you did as a child that made the hours go like minutes. So are there any questions about what I've done here? Or anything at all?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.